Good afternoon. I'm Kim Coble. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland League of Conservation Voters, and welcome again to Friday Digest. It's great to have everybody here. I am deeply honored to have Chairman Feldman with us today, and I'm going to introduce him in a minute. But let me run through what we've got, the administrative aspects of this thing, just to keep it going. First of all, our goal with these Friday Digests, which we're holding weekly now, is to help you be empowered, informed, inspired, and engaged advocates, right? The legislative process and passing bills doesn't work without your engagement. So our hope is to be giving you the information to engage in a meaningful way. So keep us posted. If there's topics you want to hear or talk, or folks you want to talk to, just complete the survey at the end of this webinar and tell us what's on your mind, and we'll try to do our best to get them in. So definitely need your input on that. Also, it's great if you can add your name and where you're calling in from in the chat, just so we can keep track. Lastly, if you have questions, type them in the Q&A. We'll try to get to them. I've got a lot to talk to the chairman about, so we'll do our best here. And I think those are all my administrative items. So, as I said, we are really honored to have Chairman Feldman with us today. He is the new chair in the basically new committee in the Senate, Education, Environment, and Energy, otherwise known as E3, I believe is where we've settled on that. And he's from District 15 and has been a longtime advocate of the environment and renewable energy. He was the Maryland League of Conservation Voters 2019 Legislator of the Year Award for his phenomenal work in getting the Clean Jobs Act passed. So it was really awesome to have him here, and I do want to welcome him. So, Mr. Chairman, welcome.
Thank you, Kim. I think it's great to be here. Great to be here.
On the other side of this webinar are members and interested people from all over the state that are really engaged and interested in environmental legislation, environmental action. So you can assured you got a great and pretty well-educated audience on the other side here. Let me start with just some questions about you. Like, why did you get involved in politics? When did you get involved? What inspired you to do it? What do you hope you're achieving in that role? Just generally.
Well, you know, I think like probably a lot of people involved in the political sphere, you know, I was a political junkie probably from being a little kid. I grew up in Pittsburgh. I'm not actually from Maryland, but you know, I eventually found myself in public service in the form of being a lawyer for the U.S. Justice Department. I was a DOJ lawyer for many years, a litigator traveling around the United States in courtroom stuff. And I think that, you know, I think validated this idea that public service is important. It's important to do things that for the greater good of humanity. And so it was not a big transition for me when a political opportunity presented itself in my legislative district. There was an opening. Actually, a former delegate, Mark Shriver of the Kennedy family, ran for the United States Congress, and there was an open seat for the House delegates. And I just was sort of in a transition in my lawyer world, and I just thought this would be a huge opportunity to do public service in a different way. And I love politics, and so I just took a shot. I had never run for anything before, and I got elected, and you know, that's kind of how I got into the mix of things. So sometimes in politics, just opportunities present themselves, and you got to, you know, make a decision and take a shot, and that's kind of long and short of it. But so I transitioned from DOJ litigator to you know, the public sphere in Annapolis, and that sort of was my that's what actually the DOJ job is what brought me to the DC area. You know, that I love politics, and there wasn't a lot going economically in Pittsburgh as they were transitioning away from being a steel city to a healthcare, high-tech city. But I ventured to live. I lived in DC, and you know, because there was a lot of political stuff, lawyer work, and all that. That's kind of you know, big picture.
Yeah, interesting. Probably this day and age, you're glad you're here and not at DOJ, right?
True. I'm not looking back at that period. Yeah.
Yeah. So, becoming chairman of a committee is a huge honor. And again, congratulations for it. I think it was a great selection. Um, and I remember you and I met earlier this session and we talked a little bit about this. And I was very impressed by your summation of what a chairman does and how it works. And so help us understand the role of the chairman around a committee versus just a member of the committee.
Sure. I mean, I do think you're a bit of the quarterback of the committee. I mean, one of the things with a new committee, as opposed to a committee that you have been on and you just become chair, in my case, in this new committee, the Education, Energy and Environment Committee, we have 8 of 11 members who have no background in the energy policy field. So one of the challenges of the chair is trying to, number one, figure out the political identity of a committee, where people are politically, what are their interests, how do you get them up to speed on some of the big issues. In this case, this new committee brought over the entire energy portfolio from the Senate Finance Committee, which is where I came from. I was the vice chair of that committee the prior 4 years. But most other than Senator Malcolm Augustine, who came over with me from the Finance Committee, and delegate now Senator Ben Brooks, who came from the House Economic Matters Committee, the other 8 members, this is a completely new subject area, the energy issues. And so part of the job of chair is to try to get an identity for the committee going, a reputation and a brand for the committee, a committee that people perceive as doing its due diligence. Everything that we put out on the floor, good or bad, is a reflection back on the committee. And I think as chair, you sort of take all that personally. And so, how we vet bills, how our hearings go, how our voting sessions go, are they professional? Are they perceived as amateurish? Is it wild, wild west? Or is there some? So I think all that gets thrown in the mix. But fundamentally for me, in the first session of a new committee with a lot of new topics, is trying to get a good idea of who these members are, what makes them tick, and how do they jive with each other? Because part of this is also personalities. It's not just politics, Democrat, Republican, but it's also folks, how they interact with each other in a way that at the end of the day, our goal is to produce good legislation to take to the full Senate that, is good for the state of Maryland, good for the world, and all that. So there's a pressure involved. I mean, I actually just came from the floor, and Senator Melanie Griffith, who's now the chair of my old committee, we were actually having this conversation, the two of us, of, there's a certain amount of pressure that even as vice chair of the committee, I didn't feel. But now, you do take sort of ownership over everything happening in the committee, little and small things.
And there's quite a leadership role on the floor as a chairman, right?
Yeah, well, even like who do you pick to defend the bills on the floor? I mean, there's a lot of administrative issues. It's a big operation. We have a lot of committee counsel deciding what bills to put out on the floor. But when we get to the floor, again, we have to defend the product of the committee, and selecting who will be the lead person, the floor leader is what we call it. So there's a lot of decisions to be made, and again, somebody has to make them, and that happens to be the chair of the committee. So
yeah,
right, exactly.
Yeah, it's a far more complex role than I think people really understand.
Well, Kim, can I just add, we had a huge dump of bills within the last week or two. So right now in this new committee of mine, we are sitting on 250 bills. 250 bills on all kinds of issues, many of which are new to me, because some of the topics like education, we passed the blueprint for Maryland, these big bills, higher ed, K through 12. These are new subjects for me. I was talking about energy being new. Well, I haven't been involved in the middle of the blueprint for Maryland or some of the subject areas, election law, and all these other subjects. So I myself am trying to get up to speed on some of the main topics here. I just had the governor's team. The governor is going to be in the committee next week with his service gap, bill, which is big. And again, areas that I have not myself been involved with. So I think that there's a lot involved here for me and for, I think, the entirety of the committee.
Yeah, it is. And Again, we're so grateful you can find time to talk with us today because I know there's a lot on your plate. Let me shift gears a little bit. The one area of expertise that you bring, obviously, is your passion for renewable energy and your work in that. And wondering, where did that come from? I mean, why is that an issue that you've been working on for
Well,
so long?
yeah, well, I think the bill that passed in 2019, I guess, was at that point my signature bill in this space, the Clean Energy Jobs Act. And I guess early on, because I do like economics, and I somehow I find the topic of how do we mirror environmental climate change with economic development issues and the job creation topics. They don't have to be at cross purposes. It frustrated me, I think, for a long time when I felt like the environmental community and organized labor, on every bill there had to be tension. And I had conversations with some my colleagues from other states, and they said that the collaboration between the environmental community and labor was a little different. So I think embarked on a path, or in terms of bills, and trying to brand myself or find a niche where those could come together, that we could do things for the environment and climate, but also build an economy, and I have to say that with the new team in the second floor, with Governor Moore, his inauguration speech, because I've cited it since then, he talked about how clean energy is not just going to be part of the future Maryland economy, it's actually going to define it. And that was his words, not mine.
Yeah.
And I think that, that Clean Energy Jobs Act, the Jobs Act part was deliberately part of the bill. So I do think we have a lot of upside economic potential here in Maryland. And so I think a lot of the work during this term will be to continue down that path. Plus, we now have a huge amount of money coming out of the United States Congress in the form of the Inflation Reduction Act, which is throwing $370 billion down to the states on clean energy projects. And we want to be getting more than our fair share. And so a lot of that money is going to be competitive with other states, and it's the states that can put policies in place, that are consistent with what happened in the Hill, are going to be the states that are going to be big beneficiaries. So that has been I like economics. And I think clean energy is an area where Maryland is well positioned with a lot of upside potential. And so that's kind of why I gravitated to that particular piece of legislation. And I'm going to continue down that road, I think, during this 4-year term, trying to sort of thread that needle in that way.
Yeah. Okay. Which leads me into my next question, which you may have answered, but just to be really clear, where do you feel the best opportunities are for Maryland in the clean energy, renewable energy, climate change space?
Well, I think, we have to demonstrate to the federal government, and we're trying to assess right now, because again, on the competitive grant part of all this, could we do now to position ourselves in terms of putting in place policies here in Maryland that are going to position ourselves to get some of the federal money. But also, I just think we're politically now aligned. I mean, I have to say that for the last 8 years, we dwelled a lot of times in this area on what do we pass, and can we are we going to have to override a veto? I mean, we spent a lot of time on that topic of, Governor Hogan's going to veto this bill. Why are you going to spend so much time trying to do this? And do we have the votes to override the veto? Well, now we have a completely new team in place. I think we're aligned politically to do some big things. And I think that in and of itself is a game changer. I will also say, just on a personal level, I now have relationships. So Aruna Miller, the new lieutenant governor, it was before she was the teammate of Wes Moore. She was my teammate for 8 years in the House of Delegates, part of my District 15 team. And so I think just looking at I'm on the Executive Nominations Committee, so we have to vet and confirm all of the governor's new appointments, and they've all been through my office. And so I feel like we're now in a place where we're aligned with the governor, we're aligned with the cabinet secretaries and all the executive branch folks, and we happen to, I think, pick up some seats in the legislature. So I think that puts us, in a position to do some big, big, big things over the next, few sessions.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate that vision. And I know you've experienced this, but one of the other changes that's occurred is the state agencies are engaging with legislation in a way they hadn't been.
Absolutely. I mean, every one of the folks who come in here to court me for their vote, on executive nominations, the first question and I think a lot of my colleagues have asked, has the new governor given you the green light to actually come in and weigh in on bills? When I say weigh in on bills, take positions on bills, share information that your agency has that we don't have, and almost without exception, they've come in and said they've been given carte blanche, green light to do that. And so that's hugely beneficial to us in the policy realm, that we have a partner, in all these agencies. So yeah, that's a huge difference from where we were the prior 8 years. So beyond vetoes and all that, was just not having folks from the agencies come in and help us craft policies.
Yeah, it was. I think the state really suffered because of that approach. So I'm glad to see that.
I'm going to give you some credit because I know you were part of the transition team, and so to the extent you have any of your fingerprints on any of the selections the governor made, I'm gonna give you some credit on that front. Okay, so Kim.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. It was really quite an honor, I will tell you. So great selections too. We're very happy about that. So we're about a third of the way through the session, I guess a little bit more than a third. I am not one that does the day-by-day count.
Well, I can tell you today's day, we're live here. We're on day 38 today, okay. Out of 90. So we have 52 days left. You can all do the math. We're a little bit more than a third, but not quite half.
Right. Okay. Well, you're one of the ones that does the count. I am not. But what has surprised you the most this session? Anything that you were, taken back by, or?
Surprise. Well, I would say that I think because it's year one of a 4-year term, I do feel, and then there were new members. We were a little late with some committee assignments, including chairmanship announcements. We were waiting to see who Westmore might pick from the administration, that would make us have to have appointments from our Central Committee. In fact, we're going to have a brand new senator on Monday night, probably. Ariana Kelly from my neighboring district will take the position of Susan Lee, and last week we had Alonzo Washington from Prince George's. So I think this sort of late, change of the committees has slowed things down a little bit. So when I said last week we had this dump of 100 bills into my committee, I think that it's caught us a little bit off guard in terms of just trying to get up to speed. Yeah. And of course, just there's a more of a feeling out process between the legislative branch, the new governor, because we're still confirming his nominees. We just took a vote just a half hour ago on the Senate floor to confirm a next round of nominees. And then the governor this morning, his appointment secretary dropped off the green bag appointments of 400 people just literally today, a half hour ago.
Wow.
So I think I wasn't anticipating that this is going to take a little longer to sort of before we really truly hit our stride.
Right.
I think it's a little bit more delayed than I would have anticipated, but we'll get there. It's just going to take a little while.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I too have, all of us have been trying to adjust to the newness. I mean, a third of the General Assembly is new. And so there's the learning curve all the way around.
Yeah, although that part's not so much, but we don't always have a new governor.
Right.
Last time, when you have the second term, our last two governors were two-term governors, right? And so it is a big difference when you have a new person. In this case, our current governor has never been elected to office, so therefore, he's not bringing this big cadre of folks from his inside political crowd. We had Governor O'Malley and then Governor Hogan. They were both two-term governors. And so, it doesn't happen that often. We have a first-term governor, coming in who hasn't been elected to either mayor of Baltimore City or whatever. Right. So I think this is, it's a unique fact pattern.
It is. Truthfully. It is. Yeah, it really is. Let me get down into a couple of real specific things. And these are we got questions early that have sort of helped us shape these kind of questions here for you. But, as we look at clean energy, renewable energy deployment, EV, ramping up EVs and changing trucks and school buses over to electrification, the grid obviously becomes very important. the capacity in the grid, the functionality of the grid. And that really lies with the PSC for the most part. But do you see that there's solutions that would come through a legislative avenue to address that? Or how do you work with the PSC?
Well, first of all, among these green, I haven't seen all the names in the green bag, but one of the things your viewers should know, the new administration has the ability and will have the ability, if they so choose, to reshape the Public Service Commission. So let me just start by saying that the two of the Hogan appointees' recess appointments were not confirmed by my committee before Westmore took the oath of office. And what that means is he withdrew those two Hogan appointees that were reappointed. And so right off the bat, it's a 5-person commission. There are now 2 available spots that the new governor can name. And then in June, the chair of the commission, his term is up. So between now and June, Governor Moore will be able to name 3 of the 5 Public Service Commission members. And when you look at the regulator, the Public Service Commission, people do not fully appreciate how important these selections will be. And so let's start with that. The Public Service Commission that exists in June will not be the Public Service Commission that is sitting there today. And in fact, this green bag drop today may have 1 or 2 of those names. I'm looking forward to, when we're done here, to find out. But as far as the legislature, Delegate Charkoudian and I, even in the last session, started to have those kinds of conversations about what we can do in the legislature. And by the way, there's a third player in all this. We are part of a 13-state grid called the PJM network, whose core mission is to sort of monitor our capacity and grid capacity amongst the 13 states. And as we try to electrify buildings, cars, everything else, we do have to absolutely, make sure that the capacity is there. And then the United States Congress has a role. There is monies in the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act that are at least partly intended to upgrade our grid. And so I think it's a partnership between a number of PJM, the Public Service Commission, the United States Congress, and the federal agencies, and the legislature through policies that I think it's all of these are a part of the mix. No one player that I just identified has a monopoly on making sure that we're aligned between capacity and policies that we enact.
And what's your I don't know if it's a philosophical approach, but maybe your thoughts around we do need to upgrade the grid. We know that PJM knows that. It's the federal government's acknowledged that. That will take time, right? So do we need to wait to implement programs until that's done? I mean, should we be delaying implementation because the grid isn't at full capacity?
I don't think so. I mean, honestly, I think, as I said earlier, I think we're aligned in a moment here. I think we should take advantage of the political moment. And if it turns out, we're here every year, we can always delay certain aspects of bills that we passed for a period of time if it looks like that's a problem. But I wouldn't wait for the perfect timing and everything has to be aligned before we do some things in the legislative branch. And so, like this session, we have bills in the committee that I think we should move, whether or not we're in the perfect place in terms of grid capacity. Malcolm Augustine has bills dealing with clean trucks. I had a bill this past week dealing with improving the infrastructure for our electric vehicles set up here in our state. We're likely to adopt the California standards on private passengers and light trucks. Look, the world's going that way. We made a big push last session on greenhouse gas emission reductions and what our targets are going to be there. And so we now have to put policies in place to get there. And, I think, yes, we can look ahead and gauge all that, but I think we should move forward. And if we need to modify things later, rather than waiting for the perfect time for everything to align and then act, because I don't think we have 10 or 12 years to sit around and
Right.
The goals of on cars, for example, is 2035. California is already August of 2022. Man, we're 100% of the cars sold in California will be zero emission vehicles, and we're going to probably follow suit this year. By the way, you have to act this year if we want to adopt California, because the way things are set up, we have to act in probably 2023 to do that. I've talked to the nominees for MDE and otherwise. We are going to do that as a state. That's still not 10, 12 years from now, but we're going to do it this year. And I would say that applies to a lot of the things we're looking at this session. And the governor, too. The governor's got funding bills to deal with some of these same topics: EV charging, clean trucks, medium and heavy duty. And we're trying to align. I think one of the big topics this session will be that my bill on EVs, infrastructure, Malcolm Augustine's bill on medium and heavy trucks, in concert with the governor's funding to put the money behind all that. Those three I look at kind of supplementing, complementing each other, but we're not going to wait 6, 7, 10 years to do that. I'm hoping we can do all of those things this session, 2023 session.
Awesome. That you are obviously making me smile. I'm very happy to hear it. One last question, and then we will let you go.
I will make one point. One of the other big bills, when you talk about transmission technology, we do have a big offshore wind piece of legislation.
Yes.
And so that's one where the issue of transmission technology capacity to get offshore wind on land, that is going to be a topic. We're going to have a discussion about, because it does tie into some of these broader policy goals, and that I think will come up in the offshore wind discussion when we take that bill up.
Yeah, that's a great bill. Just for the listeners, we're going to have a deep dive on offshore wind because it's such a great topic. Before we lose you, taking a step back. So as I introduced this group, they're engaged, informed, inspired people to take action. And can you just speak to the importance of your constituent voices or a constituent's voice in the process as you make decisions for your district and for the state?
Well, I'll start with the basic. I used to teach. Another thing I've done is I've been in academics, and when I moved, I would taught public policy at Johns Hopkins for over a decade, and in DC in their School of Advanced International Studies, and all my students were Hill staffers. And they didn't think anything happened in state capitals. But after listening to me say that all the action in the United States, for the most part, with a few exceptions, is in the 50 state capitals, all my students basically quit their jobs on the Hill. They're like, we don't do anything. We don't pass laws. Our members are like the 430th in relevance out of 435. All they do is raise money for reelection. My member has been there 10 years, hasn't passed a single bill. Anyway, let's start with the fact that most of the bill issues impacting the lives of most of the folks on this call are happening in at the state capitol level, and not in the United States Congress. And candidly, I don't envision over the next 2 years or 3 or 4 years going to be a lot coming out of the Hill. So if you're interested in weighing in on issues, the state capitals is where the action is. And secondly, we don't have filters. We are a citizen legislature. When you come down here to lobby, you're going to talk to me most of the time. It's not going to have, you're not going to go to a U.S. Senator's office and have to go navigate your way through like 35 staffers. So it's real lot of advocacy on the ground, and this is where the action is. And so we're going to have another 2,500 bills right now in the General Assembly. We have almost 1,000 bills in the Senate, 1,400 bills in the House of Delegates. And I got news for you. Within those 2,500 bills are really, really important topics that I'm sure many of you would love to weigh in. There's only 47 senators, 141 House members. The committees are where the action is. So it's a huge opportunity to have a major impact on the quality of the lives of everybody in our 6.2 million person state. And you can do it if you're interested. And so it's hugely important, hugely important. I wouldn't say that about like lobbying the Hill. I think that's largely a waste of time. But for a citizen, average person, I think the action at the state level is real, and you can make a big, big difference.
Thank you.
And by the way, we do something they don't do in the United States. If you sign up to testify in our committee, you actually get to testify. You don't the committee chairs don't pick who gets to testify like they do on the Hill. So you get your day in court. All you have to do is sign up.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you, Chairman Feldman. I just means the world to me that you took the time to talk with us and share it. And I love your vision. I continue to look forward to continuing our work.
And I'll just give a plug because I see her on the call is Kristen Harbison. I mean, she's a longtime friend of mine. You have a great team. And so that's important too, because this is also a relationships game. And if it starts with having a good team in place, whether it's LCV or anybody else. And so, you know, your team has long-standing relationship with the key policymakers on these topics. So I'm just going to give a shout out to Kristen and to yourself and the rest of your team.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. And she is a rock star, I tell you that. For the rest of y'all here, if you want to receive our weekly updates and you're not, let us know. We send out the Conservation Weekly every week, telling you what's going on, what the bills are doing. If you want a deep dive, we can send you the hot list, which gives you every detail you want about bills and status and where those are at. Please fill out the survey in the end. And so we can hear from you about what you need. Next week, we're really excited. Our Director of Climate Policy and Justice, Rebecca Rear, is going to host Camille Burke, who is the chair of the Maryland Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainable Communities. So next Friday, same time, same place at noon, we'll have a great conversation. Camille's really knowledgeable about this issue, and I think we'll have some great stories for us. So with that, Chairman Feldman, have a great weekend. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next week at Friday Digest.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye now.